Good morning, Westminster. I want to welcome you to this recording of an interview with one of the writers in the fall edition of the Westminster Writers Journal. I have the opportunity to visit here today with Don Davis, who's made a contribution to the fall edition of the Writers Journal. The Writers Journal, as most of you know by now, is a platform for creative expression, whether it's poetry or memoirs, essays, or fiction by Westminster residents. We came out with our initial edition in the spring, and some copies of it are still available in the little store. It was a big hit, but there still are some copies left if you'd like one. And the fall edition, we are hoping to be out in mid-November. If you keep your fingers crossed, we're depending on Amazon for that. But all the work has been done, and it's been formatted and copy edited, and is on its way to the printers. So in the fall edition, we've got 45 residents who have made contributions, and so it's going to be I think, a really interesting journal set in many parts of the world with some very interesting stories by our residents. So my guest today, as I said, is one of those contributors. It's Don Davis, who's been a resident of Westminster for, I think, 5 years.
Okay.
Good morning, Don.
Good morning.
How are you managing during these strange times?
I don't mind it at all. I mean, I miss the social contact a lot, but gosh, I really get a lot of reading in.
Yeah. The book sales, especially ebook sales, are up quite a bit.
Yeah, I saw it here.
And we've got a great library here also.
We do.
So you're known to most Westminster residents as the chair of the Vespers Committee, or co-chair. I don't exactly. You've got a lot of people around you that work on Vespers, but that must have been changed a lot because of the virus.
Yes, it has. It has been a big change. Virginia Stotts and I have worked on that for about as long as I've been here now, and we're only limited to 10 residents in the chapel at a time, and we usually average around 30 or 40 people. The rest, we hope, are listening on 1890, and maybe some other people who weren't in there before. But there are only 3 of us here in the residence who are willing to preach, because we can't invite anyone from the outside. Now, there are, I should say, for those who may be listening, that there are many more who are able to preach, but for one reason or another, they will not. So there are 3 of us, Judy Skaggs and Bobby Sanders and I, who rotate the meditations, and it's a briefer service, I think less than half an hour now, but it starts at 4 o'clock on Sundays, as you know. But just recently,
go ahead.
Just recently, the director has allowed outside people to start coming in. So if we can find people who are willing to come to Westminster, this hotbed of coronavirus, just kidding. They may start in November and December. So we'll see how it evolves.
Yes.
Boyd.
Well, we really appreciate the work that you 3 are doing, and we make it a point, Kitty and I, to tune to 1890 at 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoons. So thank you again for doing that. So Don, tell me a little bit about your early life. Where did you grow up, and where was your early education?
Okay, I was born in San Marcos, 30 miles south of here. 2 weeks before World War II began in Europe.
1939.
That's right. And not long after, my father, who was a teacher at the San Marcos Military Academy, and was a lay preacher of his own. He moved to California, and so I was really reared in the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley, northwest of Bakersfield. And as a preacher's kid, my dad went off to war as a chaplain. At the end of the war, he was in Europe after the Battle of the Bulge. And so I grew up with a good heritage, educated family. And I went to high school then in Los Angeles, first at a parochial school and then at a really rough public school, where the racial mix was divided about equally between white, Caucasian, Black, Hispanic, and Asian. And from there I went to UCLA and majored in history and social sciences, and then went on to Berkeley for my graduate work.
Well, your father made it back from Europe safely?
Yes, he did. He was in the first hospital unit, which entered the Buchenwald concentration camp.
Oh, he was.
Where they were trying to triage the inmates there. He brought a lot of pictures back, and he spoke to a lot of mostly men's groups at that time about his experiences.
Horrifying experiences there, I'm sure. Yeah. So you you went to Berkeley, and you were drawn to the idea. Well, you're a historian, I gather, but you were drawn to the idea of library history. What happened?
Yes. Well, I did a master's in library science, and then I decided to change my direction into librarianship, becoming a bibliographer, a reference librarian, and it was a good choice. It gave me an access to a broader range of people who were really interested in ideas and topics, and I could help them find material. So I was a librarian for 4 years at Fresno State College, now university, and then went to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, where I earned my PhD in library history, and I came to teach at Texas in 1971 after being married and having a child, our first child up there, and after coming to Texas, I never looked back.
The rest is history.
No ambition, never left.
I'd say the rest is history, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we're happy you made that choice. You've had a distinguished career at University of Texas, I know. So tell us about library history. Would you? You're trained as a historian. Why have we always? It seems to me always had libraries.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I found that library history combined my two major interests. Cultural history and libraries, that is the collection of graphic records. And I think ever since the invention of writing in the fourth millennium BC, where people needed, I hate to say it, but it was the accountants who invented writing as to how to keep a track of their number of sheep or cows or barrels of oil or whatever. So they developed a script, a way of recording that, and these became encapsulated and then finally ended up as clay tablets with the graphic marks on the outside, and of course hieroglyphic writing developed about the same time in Egypt, and the Chinese script about the same time in the East. So in one sense, you can say that you really cannot have a human civilization without graphic records. Now, whether that's marking on caves in the south of France, the figures which we're still trying to figure out what they mean, or afterward. But the main point is that writing has to be perceived and understood by the generation coming after it. And so you have the perpetuation of language and the teaching, all those things kind of come out of that. Government, commerce, literature, everything is dependent upon the written word. The oral culture, which used to be much more strong in ancient days and well up into the Middle Ages, has largely gone from being perpetuated.
So it's really the history of civilization.
That's right.
And if the Sumerian kings or the Babylonians, the rulers, were maintaining these records in some repository, it gave them an opportunity to claim some form of permanence, I guess, in a chaotic world, and hope that their beliefs and events would be recognized and perpetuated by the successors.
Yeah, so it was also a way of extending your cultural domain. When Ashurbanipal's library and librarians collected materials from all over the Assyrian Empire, that gave them a storehouse of information. And the Alexandrians did the same thing in Egypt. So, I mean, it's not a new idea, but to have as much information as you can have is a benefit.
So when the library at Alexandria was destroyed, were those records all lost completely, or were there other?
Not completely. Most of those materials had been copied and put in other libraries. The famous example of our Hebrew Christian tradition is that the Alexandrian authorities commissioned the translation of the Hebrew scriptures into Greek, and therefore that was made known all over the Greco-Roman world, and it actually preserved it for a larger group.
Yeah.
So
Greek was the language of the civilization, I guess.
It was the lingua franca of especially the eastern part of the Roman Empire. The western part was moving toward Latin.
And the records of Rome were generally transported to Byzantium, or how did that?
The official government documents and the church records would be preserved especially, and they would go to Byzantium in the 5th or 6th century.
Yeah. Well, I'm skipping around on you here quite a bit, but
all right.
So you're the co-editor of an encyclopedia that deals with this subject. That must have been a massive undertaking.
Well, it was a wonderful project. It's only one volume, and it's not exhaustive, obviously, but it's the only one of its kind, either before or after, which has been attempted by fools like us. But we got there are entries by nation, by major libraries, by cultural groups, and the fun part about it, I'll tell you, boy, it was working with the other editor of finding authors in these various countries and historians who knew to write the articles. And So we developed a relationship between all these people all over the world, and it was a lot of fun. I like that.
I bet it was. How many authors are represented in that encyclopedia?
Well, I haven't gone back to look, but I'd say maybe 200, 250.
Yeah, yeah, and each one of them had to have contributed an essay or
yeah.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful undertaking. So, did you have to study ancient languages in your preparation for this work? I mean, did you have to study Greek and?
Not in preparation for it. We are blessed by a lot of secondary resources which are reputable. I did take a year of Greek after we did the encyclopedia, maybe inspired by that. But
and I guess there's also a relationship between your work and archaeology. The archaeologists have to be involved in the recovery of the ancient, what we know of the ancient libraries.
Yeah, that is right, and you have to keep up to date on that because things change. We know a lot more about ancient libraries now than they did 50 years ago.
And has the computer and new technology helped in that work?
It has.
So, and skipping from the ancient world to the more current world, have you done any work with the history of Texas libraries?
Well, yes, I have. I sort of, once I moved here and was here for 20 years, I said, why should ancient libraries get all the attention? Why not look at what's around me? So I've been interested in Texas history for a long time. So when the Texas Library Association celebrated its centennial back around the 2002 with some students, and that's the beautiful thing about being a college professor, you always have students who will work for you for a grade. I had them help me put together a one-volume the chronology of Texas libraries and another volume of which was a bibliography of Texas libraries. So that was my contribution to the centennial of the Texas Library Association.
How far back were you able to go?
Well, in true Texas fashion, I took the history of libraries back to LaSalle on Lavaca Bay in the 1680s, because when the Spanish came to look for him, they only found the ruins of the fort, but they record that they found numerous books sticking up from the sand. So we make the logical assumption that the settlers brought aboard or brought on land with them a collection of books.
And that was the first library.
First library on the that we know about on Texas.
I guess the Spanish missions and the alcaldes and the rulers of this, they kept pretty good records, I think.
Well, the Spanish missions come a number of years later, and we have some materials from those.
Yeah. Well, I know where I grew up in Temple, there was a Carnegie Library, Library, and I think I don't know how many there are in Texas, but there must be quite a few.
Well, there were 30 or 32 built in Texas, mostly public libraries. There were 3 or 4 academic library buildings.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about Carnegie in Texas is that Carnegie's building project offers were spearheaded in Texas by the women's clubs.
Yes.
And they wrote to Carnegie to say, we can fulfill your requirements of land and a taxation if you'll give us the money for a building.
Yeah.
So they did. So all of our municipal public libraries, except for Austin, were Carnegie buildings.
Well, that was a great work, great legacy for Carnegie, I think.
And in Austin, they didn't file for one because they said the university would serve all their needs. That was back in the teens.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've got a pretty outstanding public library here now.
We have the building, especially.
I haven't really had an opportunity to explore it in any depth, but it seems impressive. Seems new age, I guess, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your piece for the Writers Journal. Oh, and before we leave the subject of the Austin Libraries and the University of Texas, Sally Leach has a piece in this.
Oh, good.
About the misplaced Copernicus volume. You're probably familiar with that story, but
yeah, but I didn't know she was writing. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, people will enjoy that. It's a bit of a mystery story. So if we can, let's turn a minute to your piece for the Writers Journal. It's called A Brush with the Cold War, Remembering Irina Ratushinskaya. Ratushinskaya.
Right. Ratushinskaya.
Ratushinskaya. Tell us something about her.
Well, I don't know as much about her as I should probably. She was an important poet of the democratic movement, largely underground
in Russia, in communist Russia, Soviet Russia, yeah.
Right, and she wrote these inspiring the poems about the Russian homeland and freedom, coming from her own Russian Orthodox heritage. And she was incarcerated as an agitator against the state. And she spent many years imprisoned. And ultimately, her husband was under house arrest for a number of years as well. As my essay indicates, I don't know if you want to go there right now, but
sure.
At the end of the essay, I note that she was released during the conference in Reykjavik by Reagan and Gorbachev as a sign of peace, which hadn't happened at the time of my essay. I had to add it at the end, but she did play a significant figure, was a symbol of freedom in the Soviet Union. So
that was one of the things that Reagan asked and Gorbachev agreed to do as
I think he mentioned
the accommodation.
I think he mentioned her name, and he said, yes, we will. I mean,
yeah. Well, your essay is an interesting story of your brush with the dissident movement, or the underground dissident movement in Soviet Russia, and it's very exciting, and people will enjoy reading it, I'm sure. So thank you for making that contribution available to us. We appreciate it.
I'm glad to have a story to tell.
It's a good one. So I want to thank you for being here with me today, and I'm sure all your neighbors will be wanting to read about your Moscow adventure in the journal. And so now to all of you watching out there, the Writers Journal, as I say, will be coming out in mid-November, and we'll keep you advised. This is Boyd Taylor thanking you and thanking Don for being here today. We'll be tune in next time. We'll be here Wednesday talking to another author. And please Stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don.